Okay, I'm going to start this video by basically stating, apologize to anyone that takes offense to this video. It's not what I'm trying to do. Sometimes I am going for the yelling, the ranting, the saying you're wrong bit. This is not really it, because this is not something I believe is per se incorrect, so much as I don't understand the reasoning for it. This is generally the basic topic of Fedor, his ranking as we speak, his ranking of the past, who he's fought, and this goes into a bit of Alistair Overeem. Why does Alistair Overeem get the pass that he does? And we'll see what happens as I go here. First up, I'm going to preface that I do believe Fedor is the best heavyweight, rankings-wise, in the world. There are a lot of guys that I'm interested to see if they can beat him. That list includes the likes of Lesnar, Carwin, Josh Barnett's on the list, but I don't think that's a ranking pertinent match because of the steroid allegations. Alistair Overeem is an interesting fight. Cain Velasquez has some intrigue to it. I would even say that, Frank Mir, if he can sort out some of his issues, that's another interesting one right there. So, while I believe Fedor is beatable, I don't believe anyone in the heavyweight division has achieved as much as he has towards a ranking. Now, we go back to Pride for this, and some people would say he was never number one in the world. I have a hard time thinking that, because you look at when he was champion in Pride. People bring up, the UFC. It's generally UFC versus Pride at that time. There wasn't enough high-ranked competition outside of the two organizations for you to establish a number one in, any weight class that they had. That wasn't in those two divisions. So basically, your debate is Fedor versus the UFC heavyweight champions at the time. I don't really understand how you can say that they would have been ahead of him, because, in a nutshell, your champions were Tim Sylvia, Andrei Arlovski, Frank Mir. Fedor's beaten two of them. Tim was kind of the dominant guy. I mean, he had lost to Mir, lost to Arlovski, but he beat Arlovski twice. And then lost the belt to Randy Couture, and subsequently the interim belt to Nogueira, a guy that was beaten twice by Fedor in Pride. People would point out that a lot of Pride heavyweights have come over and not looked very good. That's true. There's some merit to that. But they've been generally getting beaten by the guys who have come in since. Thus, they could not have been number one during the Pride days. That's just all I'm going to say on that matter. So, we look at the new guys that, UFC would like to prove this as, but realistically, we'll look at the champ, Brock Lesnar. What has he done since coming into the sport? He's got a win over Randy Couture. That's a legitimate win, but Randy's. People say Fedor doesn't fight top competition, but I mean, really, what is Randy? Randy is an old man. He's, a guy really in the twilights of his careers. I don't want to say he's a has-been, because he can still pose a lot of trouble for people, but he's a small heavyweight, and he's an older guy. I don't see how that fight, has this great meaning that, beating the likes of Sylvia and Arlovski, for example, for Fedor, doesn't have. He beat Heath Herring. Everyone remotely high-ranked has ever beat Heath Herring. So that's all I have to say on that matter. And he beat Frank Mir in the rematch. Now that's probably the impressive fight, Frank. But you know what? Frank is showing an inability to deal with bigger guys. Like, we look at the Carwin fight. That was ugly for him. He has beat Chuck Congo since, but that's Chuck Congo. So I don't see how that's enough to vault Lesnar to that number one spot. The other argument, I guess, is the guy that Lesnar's going to be fighting, Carwin. Carwin's big wins are over Mir and Gonzaga, I guess. Again, the same thing about the Mir win. You look at Gonzaga, I don't understand how a win over him means any more than particularly Fedor now fighting Fabricio Verdum, a guy who's beaten Gonzaga twice. And he's going to be fighting him in Strikeforce. I don't really get that. the other argument, I guess, would be Velasquez, who beat Nog. But aside from Nog, I mean, his next biggest win's over Congo. I mean, as I said, these guys all have the potential to be number one. Like, they have the potential to surpass Fedor. I don't see the reasoning that they have. People say Fedor hasn't been fighting top competition lately, but while he's not fighting, per se the challengers for his crown, he's fighting decent fighters. Sylvia, Arlovsky, Brett Rogers is a bit here or there. But really, I mean, let's just pull up his Fight Finder for a moment and look at who he's fought recently. Since 2007, that's kind of your post-Pride era where people pick at him. He fought Matt Lindland. Yeah, that's a joke. Lindland is 2 weight classes below him. Hongman Choi. Again, that's a bit of a joke. But then he beats Sylvia, Arlovsky, Rogers. I would say those 3 wins have about as much meaning as the 2 big wins any of the guys in the UFC, any of the big 3 in the UFC have. Now, this brings me to Alistair Overeem. People are, talking about how he's ducking Alistair. What has Alistair done that makes you think that he's some big number 1 contender? I'm not going to bring his record up, because at 33, I'm going to say what it is, just to put it out there. It's 33-11. A lot of those losses are ranking-wise meaningless. They were a long time ago. They were at a different weight class, at 205, a weight class that Alistair did not look good at. He had cardio issues. He was very sucked in. He's much better now. But even at heavyweight, and again, we'll go with the post-Pride era, so about 2007 onwards. Beat Michael Knapp. It's an okay win. He lost to Sergey Kharitonov. Beat Paul Botello. Who doesn't beat Paul Botello these days? Beat Taehoon Lee. Beat Mark Hunt. Fedor beat Mark Hunt. Beat Krokop with an illegal shot to the groin. He was winning that fight, and I would take him in a rematch, but we've seen that Krokop isn't the old Krokop. Gary Goodrich. I would say that Fedor's win way back in the day over Gary Goodrich has much more meaning. Tony Sylvester, who's a guy who now is fighting some decent fighters and losing. James Colossus Thompson, i.e. guy whose, biggest moments are I watch a lot of DVDs, followed by getting knocked out by Alex Emelianenko and getting beaten by Kimbo, even though that's controversial at best. Fujita doesn't have it anymore. Let's be honest. And granted, he beat Brett Rogers much more handily than Fedor did. That being said, it's not necessarily how you look in winning. It's how you look when you go in there against guys who are going to test you. Alistair, every time he's had a test, hasn't really come up with the answer. Sergey knocked him out, and we're going back to Pride here, so this is a very outdated fight. But Verdum beat Overeem. Verdum's now fighting Fedor. Am I interested in the Verdum-Fedor fight? Not really. It's a 4th fight with Nog, effectively. At this point in his career, Verdum's more deadly than Nog, but he's not particularly any more deadly than a prime Nog. I mean, he's got better BJJ credentials, but from MMA standpoint. But if you look at the talent that's available outside the UFC, really, I mean, who outranks Verdum outside of, I wouldn't even say that Overeem did before he, went in there and, chopped down Brett Rogers like a tree. I mean, that probably vaulted him ahead of Verdum, but the Fedor-Verdum fight was already set. And, if he never fights Overeem, I would grant that there's a problem, and I also agree that, they should have probably already fought by now, but both had outside commitments, and this includes Overeem with the K1 stuff. It's the reason why neither want to sign with the UFC. They have things they want to do outside of the UFC. And I'm trying to figure out why Overeem gets a pass on, I want to do K1, but Fedor doesn't get a pass on, I want to do Combat Sambo, which I understand that's not a big thing here, but it is a big thing in Europe, specifically Eastern Europe, where Fedor lives and where Fedor is from. So I don't fully get. I don't really understand the Fedor hate, the anti-Fedor ranking. Maybe I'm just a blind nut hugger. and you can set me straight, but I would like to hear the facts that back up the statements that people make. I would like to hear why my facts are not proper. And I will leave it to you guys to do that for me. Anyways, later.